ESPN is no longer whispering about the San Francisco 49ers. They are speaking clearly, repeatedly, and with growing confidence that this offseason will not look like business as usual in Santa Clara. When ESPN analysts, cap specialists, and insiders independently converge on the same conclusion, it usually means teams are already laying groundwork behind closed doors. And the conclusion surrounding the 49ers is blunt. Major changes are coming, not because the franchise is failing, but because the current version has reached its natural limit. This is not reactionary analysis driven by one bad playoff game or a disappointing loss. It is a structural evaluation of where the roster, the cap, and the competitive window are headed. ESPN's message is not emotional. It is mathematical, strategic, and uncomfortable. For years, the 49ers have operated under a simple philosophy: keep the core intact at almost any cost and trust that continuity would eventually break through. That approach brought deep playoff runs, NFC championship appearances, and Super Bowl contention. What it did not bring was a championship. ESPN is now openly questioning whether the cost of maintaining that core outweighs the diminishing returns. This is where the tone has shifted. Previously, ESPN framed San Francisco as one move away. Now, they are framing them as one decision away, and that decision involves letting go of pieces fans have grown emotionally attached to. The foundation of ESPN's offseason prediction starts with the salary cap. The 49ers have been aggressive, creative, and at times borderline reckless in pushing money into future years. That strategy is common among contenders, but it always comes with a bill. ESPN's cap analysts have highlighted that San Francisco is approaching a pressure point where restructures alone will no longer be enough. Restructuring contracts only delays the problem. It does not eliminate it. At some point, the team must either accept dead money, trade valuable veterans, or allow key contributors to walk. ESPN's belief is that the 49ers can no longer thread the needle without sacrificing depth or flexibility. This is where the idea of massive changes begins to make sense. It does not mean the team is tearing everything down. It means the front office will be forced to prioritize who truly matters long-term and who has become a luxury they can no longer afford. ESPN has repeatedly pointed out that championship teams often look strongest right before they undergo uncomfortable transitions. Fans mistake stability for sustainability, but the NFL rarely rewards that assumption. The league moves fast, contracts age quickly, and windows close without warning. Quarterback economics are at the center of this conversation, and ESPN has been careful but firm in how they frame it. Brock Purdy is not the problem. In fact, his emergence as a capable, efficient quarterback is the reason the 49ers were able to build such a loaded roster in the first place. ESPN's concern is what happens when that advantage disappears. A cheap quarterback allows a team to spend aggressively everywhere else. Once that quarterback gets paid, something has to give. ESPN analysts are not speculating recklessly. They are forecasting inevitability. The moment Purdy's contract shifts from bargain to market value, the roster around him must change. That is not opinion. That is arithmetic. This is why ESPN keeps emphasizing timing. The 49ers are currently at a crossroads where they must decide whether to restructure now, trade proactively, or wait and risk losing leverage. Teams that wait often get burned. Veterans lose trade value. Injuries pile up. Contracts become immovable. ESPN's prediction is that San Francisco will choose action over delay. That means decisions fans are not emotionally ready for, but decisions front offices respect. Defense, once the unquestioned identity of this team, is another focal point of ESPN's analysis. Elite defenses do not last forever, especially when built on expensive stars across multiple levels. ESPN has highlighted age curves, snap counts, and injury histories that suggest the current defensive core may already be closer to decline than dominance. This does not mean the defense is bad. It means it is expensive, aging, and increasingly difficult to maintain at an elite level. ESPN is challenging the assumption that the defense can simply run it back and expect the same results. What makes this prediction sting is that the defense has been the emotional anchor for this franchise. It is where toughness, identity, and swagger come from. But ESPN is not analyzing emotion. They are analyzing trends. Defenses that rely heavily on veteran stars tend to fall off suddenly, not gradually. One year, they are elite. The next, they are average. The 49ers front office knows this. ESPN believes they are preparing to get ahead of that curve rather than chase it downhill. Coaching is another layer of ESPN's offseason outlook that deserves attention. This is not about firing Kyle Shanahan or questioning his intelligence. ESPN has been clear that Shanahan remains one of the best offensive minds in football. However, even the best minds must evolve. The league has adjusted to San Francisco's tendencies. Defensive coordinators know what concepts are coming in key situations. ESPN analysts have pointed out that while the 49ers still dominate structurally, their margin for error has shrunk. When innovation becomes repetition, stagnation follows. This is why ESPN expects philosophical shifts, not public drama. That could mean changes in staff, adjustments in play calling balance, or different player profiles being prioritized. Sometimes the most significant offseason changes do not show up as headlines, but as subtle alterations in approach. ESPN believes those changes are already being discussed internally. The goal is not reinvention for the sake of it, but adaptation to stay ahead of the league. One of the most telling signals ESPN has sent involves trade behavior. When insiders suggest a team might listen to offers, that language is deliberate. It does not mean fire sales. It means the team is willing to consider value over familiarity. ESPN believes the 49ers possess multiple assets that could fetch significant returns if moved at the right time. This is where the idea of massive changes becomes real. A single high-profile trade can reset a cap sheet, replenish draft capital, and redefine a roster's timeline in one movie. Fans often resist this idea because it feels like surrender. ESPN frames it differently. They see it as controlled evolution. The worst-case scenario for a contender is clinging to the past while competitors get younger, cheaper, and faster. ESPN's position is that San Francisco is smart enough not to make that mistake, even if it costs them short-term comfort. Another critical element of ESPN's prediction is the league context. The NFC is not standing still. Teams are drafting well, managing cap space more efficiently, and closing the gap. The 49ers no longer enjoy the luxury of being the most complete roster by default. ESPN analysts have emphasized that complacency is the true enemy here. Staying competitive now requires harder decisions than it did 3 years ago. The margin between dominance and disappointment has narrowed dramatically. There's also an unspoken psychological factor ESPN hints at: fatigue. Not physical fatigue, but strategic fatigue. When a core group goes through multiple, deep playoff runs without a championship, pressure builds internally. Expectations harden. Mistakes feel heavier. ESPN is not suggesting the team is broken, but they are suggesting that a reset, even a partial one, can relieve that pressure and refocus priorities. Sometimes new voices and new faces are not about talent. They are about perspective. What makes ESPN's offseason prediction credible is that it aligns with historical precedent. Almost every team that stays in contention for extended periods undergoes a painful transition before either breaking through or falling off. The Patriots did it. The Eagles did it. The Chiefs have managed it carefully. ESPN believes the 49ers are at that exact inflection point. Avoiding the transition does not preserve the window, it accelerates its closure. It is important to clarify what massive changes does not mean. ESPN is not predicting a rebuild. They are not forecasting a collapse. They are not saying the 49ers are done. They are saying the franchise must choose evolution over attachment. That is a far more difficult choice than rebuilding because it requires precision. One wrong move can destabilize everything. One right move can extend contention for years. This offseason will test the front office's discipline more than its ambition. ESPN has praised the 49ers for being aggressive in the past. Now, they are watching to see if that aggression becomes selective rather than habitual. Spending big is easy when the window is open. Spending smart is harder when the window is narrowing. Ultimately, ESPN's prediction is less about shock and more about inevitability. The signs are there: cap pressure, aging stars, changing league dynamics, and shifting quarterback economics. Teams that ignore those signs rarely get rewarded. Teams that confront them early often stay relevant longer than expected. ESPN believes San Francisco understands this, even if the fan base is not ready to accept it. So when you hear ESPN predicts massive changes, do not imagine chaos or panic. Imagine difficult conversations. Imagine respected veterans being evaluated differently. Imagine the roster looking familiar but feeling fundamentally altered in philosophy. That is how smart teams survive in the NFL. Not by clinging to what worked yesterday, but by preparing for what will be required tomorrow. The real question is not whether these changes are coming. ESPN has made it clear they are. The real question is whether the 49ers execute them with the precision required to stay in the championship conversation. Because in this league, the most dangerous place to be is not rebuilding, it is standing still.